gotta be honest, like, I think women's 125 has partially killed my desire to watch women's MMA at all.
Oh. It does suck.
Like, it's bad, and it's, as I've mentioned before, Zayn's fault.
How is it Zayn's fault again?
Because he was like, oh, I'm glad they've added this division. I think it will become better than women's bantamweight in the future.
Oh.
And my rationale was, yes, but I don't want to have to watch that happen. It's going to be horrible. And indeed it has been. And
now you hate women.
It is, yeah, basically. And it is better than women's bantamweight, sort of. Because women's bantamweight is a rotting relic who can't get any new people into it.
It's almost better because, like, many of the women at women's bantamweight who were kind of good went to 125. It's kind of, it sort of feels the same, actually, as, like, women's bantamweight before.
Yeah. In some ways it is the same. It's like,
better
oh,
now.
Media dates back.
It's better now, but it hasn't crested 135's peak by any means.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's Zayn's fault.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Zayn. When Phil is dragged off to jail, as they say it in jolly old England, to the county jail, for thrashing an old woman. For the clink for thrashing an old broad in Sainsbury's, then thanks a lot, Zayn.
Yep. It was the person who drove me on my misogynist path by being like, you know what? It would be great if they made the equivalent of light heavyweight, but for women.
Yeah. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I don't know why I'm doing Disney voice, but my name is Connor Rebush, and with me as always, my co-host, Phil.
Hello, Connor. Looking for a particularly positive start to this.
Yeah, I don't know why. It's not how I'm feeling. Not for any reason related to the fights. We have unanimously decided, that's what it's called when two people agree, that we're just not going to talk about next weekend's main event. I'm not upset about that. I have plenty of stuff to talk about from last weekend. Frankly, Phil, it's kind of hard to feel despondent about MMA, much as I would like to, because, or the UFC in particular, because it has really been like 4 straight weeks of just banger fight events.
Yep.
Like the ones that were not important over-delivered and had enough relevant bright spots to be worth remembering. The ones that we knew were going to be important were both important and thoroughly entertaining top to bottom. It's been like 4 weeks in a row where we've just had really, really good fights every weekend. And that was no exception last weekend. Yeah, go on.
In last weekend, I think, in some ways, it was the maybe excuse us for this one. It was kind of the following on from such incredible, like 2 back-to-back incredible pay-per-views.
Yeah,
there was some reason to assume this was going to be like the cooldown card.
Yeah,
and we did heavily underestimate the excitement potential.
Yeah.
Of the main event. And it ended up being, the week before's pay-per-view, which is, I think, probably going to go down as the card of the year. It ended up being the kind of Lee Quarantillo and Shane Burgos to that card.
Mm-hmm.
And it was following on the heels of something that it couldn't match, but god damn did it try. It was very good.
Yeah, it was exceptional.
Just very violent.
It was gross. It was really violent. It had the thing that great fight night cards have, which is variety. Like Fights that you didn't expect to be very violent were violent, like Andrea Lee, Cynthia Calvillo.
Mm-hmm.
That was violent. So was Felicia Spencer, Leah Letson. That was too violent, frankly. It had the stupidest heavyweight fight of all time. The perfect kind of stupid heavyweight fight where it's over in 30 seconds and maybe should have been over in 25 seconds, but Herb Dean was there. Yeah, it was very violent, top to bottom, and I cannot complain. So, you want to talk about the main event?
Let's do it.
As you noted, I actually have yet to release this bonus episode. Don't worry, listeners. I am going to release it. It'll probably be too late for the more like degenerate gambling addicted ones of you to find it worthwhile. But it was mostly recaps. We spent the vast majority of the time talking about stuff that happened on the Usman Covington 2 card, UFC 268, and like really at the very end, in an incredibly dismissive fashion, just outright, picked Max Holloway. Because why wouldn't you? And looking at the fight, why wouldn't you? You're going to pick Max Holloway. It wasn't that close in retrospect or in review. It was a hell of a lot closer than our preview would have made it out to be, though. And when that bonus episode does get posted, and I think I'll post it today, you will have that as a little treat at the end of our recaps. Just us being like, yeah, fuck Yair Rodriguez, he's a joke. I think that's
Calvin Kattar. We gave his fight with Max, a lot of solemnity and like, oh yeah, well, you can't expect him to win, but a massive puncher, he's going to be there the whole time, so on. He just mostly gets utterly smoked.
Completely, yeah.
And this one was just like, who is this Yair Rodriguez guy? And it gave us an absolutely incredible fight. Again, like, kind of dismissed him in the run-up to, I can't remember if you did, I kind of did, against Korean Zombie as well. And again, he gave us an incredible fight that even if he wasn't on his way to winning by the time he hit his insane elbow, like, definitely showed that this guy is insanely gritty and can and will be there for a long time if you let him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I probably dismissed him. I mean, Yair is a perfect trap fighter for people like us, I think, because he's an important lesson, a lesson we need to relearn again and again, that fighters don't have to like do things right to be good. Mm-hmm. That is in fact not important if you have the right physical and mental makeup. That there are ways there are ways of like training in one way where, everything's a mix of two things. You can't look at anything through the lens of this or that without finding a bit of both, right? And, Yair Rodriguez is a better fighter than like a technique nerd wants him to be. There's the police again. Okay, now that they're gone, Yair sucks. All right, I was only saying that so they didn't arrest me. No, and I think there's kind of a parallel to that happening in how people are now reviewing this fight. I've rewatched it a couple times now. A big consensus thing seemed to be, actually it wasn't close. In retrospect, which like it definitely is. And I think the decision has to go to Max. There's no argument there because like you talked about last week, Phil, it's one of those things where, the only really clear rounds belong to Max. So how is Yair really going to win the decision here? But there are 3 rounds that are pretty dicey. And I think part of the reason people are now looking at it and saying, it's people like us, like fucking dorks, look at that fight and be like, Max actually won pretty easily, is kind of for the same reason that we find it so easy to dismiss a fighter like Yair. What I'm saying is he landed a lot of calf kicks, and I think because we all know that defending calf kicks is actually relatively simple, some people now think, actually, they don't matter. But they do. And he landed a shitload of them and hobbled Max Holloway and made him fight about 60% of this fight out of his usual stance. It was a really, really gutsy, gritty performance from Yair Rodriguez. and his technique might be a mess in some ways. And really, I think even a bigger problem than his technique, which he's more than athletic enough to get away with and durable enough, is like a lack of sort of concrete process to direct those techniques. But he is nonetheless an incredibly tough out, and more uniquely a tough out for Max Holloway, certainly than we recognized.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in some ways, I found myself thinking, I think he's just a tough out for any striker, to be honest.
Sure.
Like, I just don't think MA defense for anyone is really at the point where you can just fight a giant for the weight class, very athletic, very durable, hyper fast, powerful kicker will back you off with like flurries of punches if you get close enough. Again, as you said, maybe not the biggest technically, but I think A, he looks better there. B, like it's just an incredibly scary proposition to get out of there without getting hurt.
Yeah,
he's not someone you can really beat without getting into trouble at some point, I think, unless you are a very durable and aggressive wrestler. I think that would probably still, that would probably still be a terrible matchup for Yair.
And the only the reason Max's 2 rounds that were clear was because of the controlling wrestling in large part.
So yeah, whoever the equivalent of Frankie Edgar is for the division. I mean, I think Zabit would be a fascinating matchup for a lot of reasons. But yeah, I think it's just very, very hard. We saw it was such an interesting performance because it was the things that I thought would have an effect. So so let's go back to how we saw this. So again, we pretty much thought that Yair is dangerous, but Max has an incredible chin. That is true. But we essentially thought that Yair would fade out the fight as he has a couple of times, and that Max would just drown him. His terrible boxing in the pocket would get, Max would negotiate in there, and he would just push him up against the cage and wreck him. Some of the interesting things that happened is obviously that, firstly, Max sort of had was troubled by Volkanovski's kind of low kicks and counterpunching in their first fight, adapted a bit around it in the second, then just sort of seemed to go back to Max from the first fight in this one. Yeah,
it would have been a great time for kick heavy Max to I think put his stamp on that range as he kind of did in Volkanovski too.
Yeah, it was. So it did seem like a little bit of a regression from Max in that way. I mean, he had sort of, this felt in some ways reminiscent of the Whittaker-Till fight, in that it was an ugly style matchup that was made a bit uglier by
flashbacks.
The favored fighter trying new things. They also bought into the thing that everyone was saying, that this is just going to be this is a terrible matchup. But in some ways, I honestly support that. People should be trying to build elements into their game.
Sure.
And in this case, it was Holloway having more of a phase shift game. Had this weird entry, his jumping sidekick and sort of push to the body thing, where he would either come round and trip or basically push Yair over. It's a real weird adaptation.
Yeah. I think Yair had a similar takedown, actually. The one that he got was a similar kind of shifting in. And sort of I know there's a very specific judo term out there for this move. I don't know it though. But yeah, it's sort of like a I don't know, type of shit Machida used to do in a bit.
Yeah. I mean, he tried to turn it into an outside reap at one point, but I don't think it worked. But it was mostly, I think, just to close the distance whilst keeping his foot up in the air. Yeah. So in the run up to this fight, I was thinking a few things. Like I was remembering, we'd called out the Pettis fight as being the most similar one. Mm-hmm. And I remembered thinking, like at the time, this fight wasn't that easy for Holloway.
No, it had a rough start.
Looking that way, but it didn't start that way. And Holloway, was Pettis. I mean, this was his first trip down to the way he looks awful on the scales.
He was primed to wilt. In a way that Yair did not here.
Was it his first trip down to featherweight? He still looked terrible. He might have, because I know he fought Chucky Olives at some point. But he looked dreadful.
Yeah.
But it did take him some time to work in to range. I think in this fight we just saw that Yair not having process also meant that he's still constantly ready to come up with some weird counter at every point.
Yep. Which
often just meant like low kicks, and Max could never quite key into what kind of low kick he was going for.
Mm-hmm.
It was outside, it was inside, it was outside, it was from both stances. It was calf, it was regular low kicks, and it was body kicks as well. You could tell that Max was a bit, maybe, title run Max might have just gone after him. Young Max Holloway might have just tried to bull rush him. But, the current version of Max Holloway, I think,
Count of Monte Cristo,
definitely wanted to outduel him.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think he ultimately did sort of outfox Yair Rodriguez. In addition to, I don't know that it probably was the right call that he couldn't just out-tough him. He was, Max, as clear as I do think this victory is in hindsight, I really don't see a way you could give the fight to Yair at all.
No, you have to give him 1, 2, and 5.
Yeah.
And I think 2 is very hard to give him.
2 probably has maybe his most consistent minute of the entire fight and then very little other success. There's 1 minute in that round where he lands a shitload of hard kicks and is really going, and then Max is just jabbing him and hitting him in the body, and it lands a flying knee and all types of shit.
Yeah, and there's a very strong argument. There's a strong argument for round 3 as a 10-8. I don't think it is, given other 10-8s that we have seen.
Yeah.
But that's very...
Yeah. But basically, any one of the rounds that Yair won, there's a case for Max to have won that round as well. So,
do you think he won round? Who do you think won round 5?
Watching it live, I gave it to Yair. I might still give it to Yair. I think he just comes out super hard in that round and lands the more powerful shots. Honestly, Max looks a bit drained from the all-terrain pace that they have set together.
Yeah. As I said, it was just very gritty. Really came out and went for it in that last round.
That's Yair, man. He's either styling on you or he is dragging a miserable fight out of you. Just refusing to be put away or go away. So I also became more cautious. Fortunately, after our predictions, I was a lot more sort of circumspect about the idea of Max clearly dominating this fight by the time I did the vivisection with Zane Simon, who has made you a misogynist. I was the Volkanovski kicking thing was interesting. I think here, I don't know if I would call it a regression. I think a lot of what Max brought to the table in the Volkanovski rematch were specific adaptations. And it looks here like he just didn't recognize that there could be similar problems against Yair. Mm-hmm. It was Max Classic. It was a return to form, with other new wrinkles added. Which, it's not like we've never seen Holloway wrestle with people before. Or work in top position or go for submissions. He's He's definitely done that before. He submitted Cub Swanson back in the day, for example. But there is something to Yair's like, oh, I will just kick you anytime you give me space, that I think we should have seen is bound to be effective against Max Classic. Like, he likes to test the range with his jab and then draw back and see how you respond and then punish you for it and then continue running you down more and more as the fight goes on, using those counters as triggers for pressure. That's like the Max Holloway process. And if you're just going to kind of probe into the pocket with your jab and then step back, a guy with a quick trigger on a calf kick can eat your leg up until such time as you're actually like applying constant pressure. And so, like, you said something earlier about our view of how this matchup would go. That, yeah, you know, Yair's shaky punches in the pocket will just get him like chewed up by Max. That ultimately started to happen. But Max did have to adjust. There's a point in this fight where he starts going southpaw a lot, to take that calf target away from Yair. There's also the fact that I think Yair starts throwing it less because he like broke his foot. Or did something. His foot turned into a balloon after the fight was done. But there comes a point where Max is also just stops doing that thing where he tries to set up and then recounter and steps into the pocket and just sort of covers up and stays there while Yair throws his trigger counters and then makes him pay within the pocket. It was a bit of Max fighting against type, I think. It was sort of like seeing Joanna Jędrzejczyk have to feel the need to go on the front foot and forge her way into the pocket by like force. Where like, I don't know, it made me think of the Dustin Poirier fight almost. A completely different matchup, but one in which Max keeps finding his initiatory move countered and has to just kind of completely tough it out to get in and stay in range where, yes, he might absorb damage, but he has far better chances of delivering damage in return. So I think that was a big part of the brawliness, is that Yair was really being very effective, breaking Max down at range. Which is not to say that Max wasn't having plenty of his own moments there, but I think there's kind of a clear turning point alongside the wrestling in round 3. Thereon after, Max is like hanging out in the pocket and not taking backward steps once he decides to engage, because Yair was eating his leg up every time he did that step in, step out entry. So Warrior Brawler Max was kind of interesting. He ultimately did have the advantage in the pocket exchanges, but it was a hell of a lot harder getting there than we gave it credit for last week.
Yeah. Yair still has, say some interesting defensive reactions. Like the,
hey, he can put the
turning
moves
away and covering up thing. Did make me think, like, what, this is sort of an example of, people could use this as an example for like pound for pound, of how things work in a pound for pound sense and how to compare divisions to each other. Because you could be like, what does it take to be Derek Lewis at featherweight? And this is kind of what it takes. You have to be this athletic, this varied, and if your reaction to punches is to like occasionally to curl up and like run away, this is how good you have to be like the unstructured athlete at featherweight. Mm-hmm. Like, this is how much you have to offer, and it is a lot.
Yeah. I mean, there's room to critique the technical form, as with most areas of Yair's game, of those head movement sequences. But the man can improvise and put his defensive moves together. It was pretty effective at every moment that Holloway wasn't exclusively going to the body. It was completely useless against that, but he made Max miss on an awful lot of headshots even late into the fight. And I think For Yair in particular, the threat of like a weird elbow you don't see coming, definitely added to that. Max being a little more reluctant to all out pursue when he was putting himself, what would for most fighters be completely out of position, in defending. For Yair is that a position that you can strike from? It might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think Yair has also genuinely benefited multiple ways from not fighting for a long time.
Sure.
This is sort of similar to the Ortega thing, where he's kind of sat on a ranking for a while, and people were like, "Well, is this justified?" And he came back, and the answer was pretty much yes.
Mm-hmm.
But also meant that he didn't get scouted too much.
Mm-hmm.
Do feel that Yair is probably someone. I mean, for a number of reasons, it benefits him to not fight very often. I mean, on the one hand, it means that he doesn't break his foot all the time.
Yeah, that would be good.
It is an incredibly, he has an incredibly damaging style, I think, for himself as much as the opponent.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it just means that people don't figure him out quite so much. People do have that thing where they're like, oh, I don't know whether he's going to attack me now. I think with more tape and more understanding of how he works, he probably would get figured out a bit more.
Well, even in the course of this fight, Max came up with some really good answers to that head movement the longer it went on. The body shots
he started it was the fact that Max was able to start snapping him down and landing knees to the body and
those
almost
were cool.
Killing him with that ninja choke.
Yep. There were several occasions, in fact, where Yair was spinning and Max was close and he was like, I am going to do an elbow. And Max is just like, thanks for the angle, and throws on a quick side clinch and knees him in the belly. I loved Max's knees in this fight. I thought they were a really good adjustment to be able to crash into range against a fleeing opponent and take advantage of that hunched over head movement position he was putting himself in. Yeah. There's something to be said about that. Yair does have a sneakiness that maybe benefits from just occasionally fighting and putting on a war.
And again, I think genuinely looking better.
Yeah.
Throwing more straight punches, having better footwork. He wasn't just throwing blizzards of hooks up close when he was in punching exchanges. I think Holloway genuinely wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Whether this was going to be good straight punches or the, fighting off a swarm of bees on ice, as I believe Sriram described his boxing.
Yeah, and it was a bit of both.
Yeah, he genuinely didn't know which one it was going to be. I mean, it's interesting. If Yair is out again for a really long time, there's possibility that he comes back to quite a different division because there are more wrestlers on the way. And if he never fights someone like Zabit, there's still people like Ivluev or what's his face?
Potentially Dan Ige down the line might do a wrestling game.
Bryce Mitchell.
Him. Oh, of course.
Kind of people Mitchell. Where it would be very dangerous.
Yeah.
To give up a takedown to them. Way that it still isn't quite to Max Holloway.
Yeah.
So. But I suspect that Yair will probably be out for a long time because he fucked himself up. And he'll come back and he'll get another action striker.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Whoever's hot at the time.
That's fine.
And fine, he's earned it.
Yeah. Yeah, give him Calvin Kattar. They've both been brutally destroyed by Max Holloway. Well, less brutally. I think that would be an interesting fight. Why not?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, let's take a break then. When we come back, I think we will end up just sort of running through, other stuff that happened on this card. We've got, what else did happen on this card? We've got Song Yadong versus Julio Arce. We've got Joel Alvarez absolutely dominating Thiago Moises. My boy Sean Woodson, my support for whom, Kyle McLaughlin, has been completely just embarrassing himself trying to mock me for it on Twitter. and other stuff too after this. Oh, and then I guess we're going to talk about some undercard fights for next weekend after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are talking about the Holloway Rodriguez undercard now, and I think we should jump right to the main card opener. Was Song Yadong versus Julio Arce. And my question coming into this was sort of like, I kind of wanted to see both guys have made some adjustments recently. I think Song Yadong showed a new level of calculation and cautiousness in his last fight against Casey Kenny. And Julio Arce went the other direction, came down to bantamweight and suddenly looked like Edson Barboza and Jose Aldo before him, like he slotted neatly into the sort of slugger mindset that rules this division. And ultimately, it was just sort of like the guys that they were before who ended up fighting, where Julio Arce decided to do the classic technician thing and had some success, and Song Yadong was like, started pretty smart, but ultimately realized he needed to get in there and kind of mix it up and win with his athletic advantages. And it was a really fun chess match while it lasted.
The other thing, I kind of saw it as being the other way around. I mean, not necessarily in the terms of what I say did, but in terms of who had to adjust. So I felt that, like, at the beginning, I'll say it was essentially like, he was, at least in some form, going to go for the approach that, what's his face? Kyler Phillips used.
Mm-hmm.
He was essentially going to draw Dong onto punches and, counter him. He was going to have like a slow-paced sniping match with him.
And he was having some success. He landed quite a few those southpaw jabs early. Footwork and defense
He was
were
having
good.
some success, but he was definitely not winning.
Yeah.
I think that was the problem.
I think the first 2 minutes before Song started like putting his strikes together, you're like, oh, okay, I can see what he's going for. And then it was like, oh, he's countering the jab now.
Yeah, so I think that essentially it just showed like the limits of, I'll say, being a bantamweight, and the opportunity cost of what happens when you do something like that. Because he can go down and he can become a bigger puncher, and that allows his technique to shine. But it also makes him, relatively slower, and Dong is simply lightning fast. So in the sort of slow-paced sniping match, Yadong was just too quick for him, and just started landing the cleaner shots because he could dart in and out of range before Arce could. And then Arce was like, okay, we're going to bite down and make this a bit of a tougher match. Closer in the pocket, and then he just got flatlined.
Yeah. Do you think, did Arce hit a point where he tried to make it an uglier sort of fight?
I think he definitely tried to up the pace and the aggression. I think in the second round, if you look at how many jabs he starts throwing in the second round, as opposed to just look at the pace of the way he's fighting compared to the first. I think he really, because they told him, you lost that round, and they were like, and he is someone who makes his reads, and he was like, okay, now I'm going to go after this guy, and it didn't work because Song Yadong is unfortunately incredibly durable and very fast and very powerful.
Yeah. And made good decisions. in the fight. I mean, some really nice tactics. Yeah, you are right, actually. I mean, he definitely is mixing it up a lot more eagerly. He's still not at any point, like insisting on, say, forward movement, but it's almost like he just can't.
I think, yeah.
He gets in and then he has to get the hell out of the way because he can't anticipate cleanly whatever is coming next. Yeah, I mean, I still thought, we did see, in that we got a nice glimpse of Arcee's ability to adjust as a great technician. He threw some nice combinations. I appreciated this as a fight where both guys were going pretty diligently to the body.
Yeah, that was very good. Like, yeah, right hands to the body jabs, very nice. I mean, this was a real, just a great event for body work, capped off by Max Holloway doing less than he normally does, but still doing like a lot of good body work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that kind of was the theme of it. We'll talk about Sean Woodson in a minute as well, who actually won with the body shots. But I thought I was very impressed with Song Yadong in this fight. I thought he obviously had a sort of number of physical advantages. I think he was probably already a very hard hitter, and part of that he is, as you said, lightning quick, and could just react and let strikes go faster than Arcee when they were both in range. But I also think we did see, we saw some nice thoughtfulness in how those strikes were let go and what strikes he chose to let go. The counters he came up with for the southpaw jab, like that was really the first sort of small turning point or the first shift in one way or the other of the fight after a fairly neutral, even start. He came up with some really nice counters. Right uppercut to the body. I always love that punch. Right straight to the body. Almost as soon as he started landing that, he started looking for the left hook up top after it, which worked. When it didn't work, it forced Arcee to bail completely and allowed Song to pressure him. I think there's a pretty obvious setup for the head kick that played a role in the end of the fight in the number of right body kicks that Song landed throughout the fight up to that point. I think it may have been the first head kick he threw, which is great. He was perfectly happy. The body shot was there. He was landing it consistently. He just kept finding it. And then almost didn't even pull the head kick out until I think he already had Arcee a little shaken up.
We were talking a bit about this on Twitter, right?
You were right, I think.
There's a strange exchange, but just before the head kick, where it does look like Arcee gets buzzed by like a short right hand?
Yeah, it's almost like the elbow catches him.
Yeah.
It's like a shot comes in, a strike comes in, it's a punch, and then the elbow sort of catches him. He's already trying to counter, and his feet are getting out of position because Song shoves him like out of a clinch. But I think you're right. I think it does shake him up just like a second before that head kick lands.
Yeah, I mean, what's not to like about Song Yadong? Because he's very athletic. He's improving in the right ways. We saw him, seen him now adapting to. We saw him have a tough match against Kyler Phillips, and then essentially steal that style for himself. He's watching his work less, which I like to see a lot. Mm-hmm. He has defensive reactions more after he throws than he used to.
Yeah.
They're clearly, baked in. He will do them, I mean, not necessarily this is the best thing to do in the world, but, you can see he will slip preemptively, sometimes on it just to make sure that he's out of the way.
Yeah.
He's going to the body. He's punching off kicks, and he's, as we saw in the finishing sequence, he's kicking off punches, but he's also punching off kicks.
That is frequently very effective, by the way. That like punching off the same hand, off the same side that just threw the kick. Mm-hmm. It's not even close to the first time I have seen that quick, powerless looking little strike, little punch, do damage. I think it hurt Arce just as much as the head kick had. He didn't see it coming. He was already dazed. And then it was no recovering after that. Yeah, he's very good.
Nothing. Tons of things to like. And he's now finished another person who's basically never been stopped by strikes before.
Is that true?
I don't think Arce's ever been knocked out. It was like Alejandro Perez. Like, I don't think he'd ever been stopped by strikes.
Yeah, you're
before
right.
either, had he?
You're right. No, I don't believe
Maybe
he had.
Massimo Fullen back in 2011.
Doesn't count.
Yeah.
Yeah, Arce certainly hasn't been. Other people have come close. Shayman Moraes had him badly hurt many times.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Kelleher had him hurt a few times in one of their fights, if I recall correctly. Dan Ige certainly slugged it out with him a bit. And, Song Yadong, first guy to actually finish him with the hands and the shins. Very good. And it was a really good fight. Like, this is a chess match. Stop saying that about Valentina Shevchenko fights. This is a chess match. Two guys making adjustments. The momentum shifts are kind of muted for the most part because both guys are really like at all times competing to keep that edge, to be that one or two steps ahead of the opponent, and neither can hold on to that advantage for very long. Like I said, while it lasted, really fun little tactical battle. All right. Joel Alvarez. I don't have a lot to say about this one. Like,
he's a super fun like fighter to have in the division.
Oh, absolutely. I'm
admittedly, what we're defining as the division is somewhat loose at this point.
How do you mean?
Wait, let me just check. This is the second time he's missed weight. Come on, he's a welterweight.
Oh yeah.
This weight against Yakovlev, like, he's a huge dude. We can't have the thing is, every time this happens, have someone like Oliveira or Lineker or whatever, and they're fighting, and they're like, no guys, I promise I can make it, and they fluff the weight again.
Yeah.
Eventually, they get punted up to the division above, and they're completely fine.
Unless they're Darren Till. I guess he's fine.
Yeah. He didn't actually miss weight, did he? Did Darren Till ever miss weight?
I don't know, actually. Good question. Yeah, that's true. Whenever somebody has to be pushed up but to the next division, I really do feel like, in most cases, I'm always arguing for like fighter autonomy. And not like, I'm not a fan of USADA. There's obviously an appeal to the idea, but you're just like forcing these people to have to check in 24 hours a day and all of this invasive shit. If you miss weight twice, you should not be allowed to fight in that division. That's fine by me. If your style can't function without you having what is clearly an unfair weight advantage, then just, fuck it. You don't get to fight in this division. Yeah, that's a fair point. That may in fact be an additional reason that I feel I have so little to say about Joel Alvarez. He's kind of like, the guy he reminds me of is, was it Manny Bermudez?
Yeah.
Who was a giant. Casey Kenny had like a extremely courageous performance against him because Kenny looked like a baby fighting his father. Like he looked like a dwarf standing next to Bermudez. And Bermudez was like huge and would hurt people on the feet like almost instantly, would take them down and quickly submit them. And then I think he may have been pushed up a division and it didn't work out. It turned out there wasn't that much depth to his game. And for the time being, I still kind of wonder, as credible a win as I think Thiago Moises should be, how much depth is there to the game of Joel Alvarez when he isn't playing the role of an obvious weight bully?
Yeah, I mean, Alexander Yakovlev is someone who has also been a welterweight, lightweight tweener, and someone who is on the downslope. And Thiago Moises, I mean, so basically, at some point, I was actually watching these fights live for once, and I was tweeting like, I'm just going to sit here and figure out this longer, taller, more diverse fighter from the end of their reach. That can't possibly go wrong. Ah!
Yeah.
And people were like,
bit of a running theme.
Joel Alvarez is he's a welterweight and so on. But it applied. I didn't actually specify which fight from this card I was talking about.
Yeah.
Because there were a bunch of them.
Yeah.
I mean, it ended, in retrospect, this was a terrible approach for Moises to take his actual physical approach to, which is that he's just going to hang around and wait for the occasional counterpunch.
Yeah.
And Alvarez just swarmed him from outside his reach.
Yeah, that is Moises' approach. Like, that's his thing. He's never been an adjuster. He didn't bring any new ideas to basically any fight in the UFC so far. He's one of those guys who has been surprisingly effective, given that his game seems like it maybe shouldn't function. But he's always been like an over-patient counterpuncher and like guard grappler. So yeah, feels like I probably picked it wrong, but it certainly feels like it should have been a predictable result given that.
I mean, it's one of those ones where I did not realize what the size dynamic looked like until I saw it.
Oh man,
like Vera Edgar.
Yes,
just didn't have a conception. I couldn't possibly think of the fact that Edgar would still be massively outsized. I don't think of Moises as a small lightweight.
No. He didn't look small next to Makhachev. Yeah. No, yes, Alvarez is a division.
It's a welterweight.
He's at least one division below where he should be fighting. He probably wouldn't look small as a middleweight. With a couple years to bulk into the division, he'd probably look perfectly normal there.
He's 6'3".
Yeah.
And not like skinny 6'3". It's like
exactly like Sean Woodson is super duper tall, but he is also really really lanky. His legs look like they're about to snap off just from him moving them around himself. That is not how Joel Alvarez looks. He's got a Darren Till build. So. Don't tell me, Phil. You Googled pictures of Joel Alvarez, and now you're just
in awe at the size of this absolute unit. I'm just watching the fight, to be honest, and he's standing next to Michael Bisping.
Yeah.
And to be honest, he does not look 6'3" here.
Okay.
Michael Bisping is still visibly taller than him.
Well, Bisping wears lifts. He seems like the type.
Oh yeah, you might be right actually.
He seems like the type.
Yeah.
I don't actually know that. I have no evidence that Bisping wears lifts, but
he's definitely wearing shoes.
Yes.
So that might just be. But he's huge. He's a welterweight. He needs to fight welterweights
for sure. Welterweight at the very least. Welterweight would be fine. And yeah, I do fully think if you miss weight twice, I don't give a shit. Dana can drop the fucking book on you at that point. I'm not going to be offended for your sake because, I don't like.
So did you and Zane?
Uh-huh.
Cynthia Calvillo?
Yes. Explain? Yes, we did.
Explain.
Lame?
Explain.
Oh, explain. Well, the idea was that...
This is the great thing, is that I don't have to pick these fights. And then I can come back after the fact and be like, you fools.
Yeah. You can be before the show be like, I don't like women's MMA, but then still use it as some sort of weapon against me. Well, the idea is that Andrea Lee is very slow,
right,
and ponderous. That might give enough of an edge for Calvillo's flighty, ineffective boxing to keep her in the game long enough, and that Andrea Lee's own insistence on wrestling would put her into Calvillo's wheelhouse. Because Calvillo is like, in so many ways, a lost cause at this point.
He really is. Yes, this was
And this is a nail in the coffin, no doubt.
Yeah, there were a lot of rubber hitting the road moments in this card for like prospects, and there are a lot of turning points. This was a real turning point fight because both of these women had moderate height behind them.
Mm-hmm.
1 point, like not really height, but
some
expectations,
some cachet as prospects. Yes.
Yeah. This was, I think, the most significant example of that. Yeah, I mean, you could just suddenly, when the fight started, you could see the dynamics. I mean, Calvillo was someone who was forced up in a division, but
which seems crazy.
Never even looked particularly big as a strawweight.
Yeah.
I mean, she's just one of these. I think she's one of these unfortunate people who is just quite dense, and maybe her body just doesn't cut weight well. Yeah, like Michael Chandler, for example, is a huge-looking lightweight. He regularly comes into the cage. He's been, been candid about this. He regularly comes into the cage at about 180.
Yeah, that is bananas.
Even
though he's
so
short.
He's one of these people. But yeah, once again, it was the dynamic of like trying to set up a outside counterpunching game against a huge tall person who just threw out a stream of volume that she was totally unable to deal with.
There was even almost, after the very start, it was almost like Calvillo then decided, I don't know what to... Calvillo then decided she was going to like try to be the slugger. Like there came a point in the fight where Calvillo was mostly on the front foot and was trying to just like forge ahead into the pocket and throw combos, and her punching mechanics are awful.
Yep.
She's, like Andrea Lee might be slow, but technically she's not really that bad a striker at all. She's at least got like better weight transfer. She's got just more snap on her shots. Calvillo is not a good puncher. It's almost like Calvillo took literally the opposite lesson away from the fight with Andrade. It's like, I guess punching people really hard works. I'm going to do that. I don't know. I don't know what to make of her trajectory as a fighter.
She was trying to go for clinches.
Yeah.
She just doesn't have a shot.
No, she doesn't have a shot
really.
takedown. She does not have she doesn't have any process when she gets into the clinch to consistently get people down. It's like she'll get lucky and it will be literally like a standing scramble where she can jump on the back because that's her thing. She has a great back take, or she has nothing. But this completely ineffective boxing. Where
on the plus side, I thought Lee looked actually pretty good.
Yeah. Lee's a solid fighter.
It was sort of target practice, but she's moving her head much more than she was. She has to keep reminding herself to do it. But she was kind of picking shots off with her elbow. She was just like pretty accurate and clean with her shots. Like, thought she looked like she was fulfilling some of that promise from a while ago.
I think Lee is one of those fighters who has just kind of quietly but steadily been getting better the whole time. Because she has always been a really pretty technically focused fighter. She's almost like a more confident Leon Edwards, where like her career seems to have just been one long stream of her going out trying to prove that she can do every area of technique when it suits her.
Yeah.
And I
think just the fact that she was one of the most defensively deficient fighters around.
Yeah.
Meant that she had these fights where she would just end up looking like, what's his face? The heavyweight who like can low kick, but also just gets obliterated.
This sounds
went to bare knuckle.
Chase
he can
Sherman?
look okay. Yeah, Chase Sherman.
Okay.
Like she would be like that, and it was like, yes, if you are hitting a practice dummy, this is fine. And if the other person isn't fighting back at all, yes, you are mixing up your shots and throwing combinations and so on.
Yeah.
Also, you are absolutely defensively stationary at all times. she's improved that. I didn't necessarily expect that. And again, it was a very forgiving. It turned out to be an incredibly forgiving style matchup.
Yeah.
Yeah. Decent.
Yep. Another error on my part, Phil. Another error.
Why your deep belief in Cynthia Calvillo?
It's over now. It is over now. I promise you. I promise you, I'm past it. I've given up on Cynthia Calvillo. Her and last week Shane Burgos, I've given up on them. I'm going to be better at picking their fights. Giving up on them in different ways. Like, I'm going to be picking Shane Burgos more in just stupid brawls, knowing that is absolutely the only thing that's going to happen. And I'm going to be picking against Calvillo because she's just getting worse. Okay, last one to mention. Another sort of mostly one-sided, hey, what if I stay on the end of this super long guy's reach fight? Sean Woodson versus Colin Anglin. What do you make of Woodson, Phil? Obviously, I like him. He's got sharp boxing technique. He's weird. These are two things that always reliably appeal to me in MMA fighters.
I think I've basically said it before, but I think he's just too tall.
Yeah, he could probably go up a division, put on a little muscle.
I don't think he can put on much muscle. He's just. I mean, look at him. He's
got a weird build.
He's a freak.
Yeah.
There's just a point at which being like super tall person just stops being effective. Not being effective, but like it stops being an unmitigated advantage, and the disadvantages become like enough to stop you from becoming elite. I think that's the main thing. I mean, because he can see shots coming well, he can defend nicely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's going to come up against like a coherent low kicker and counter puncher who's just going to wreck him.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw there's like the fundamental problem with Woodson's game, because like what got him in trouble against Julian Erosa is he doesn't really, for all his height and length, he doesn't really have a consistent way of keeping people at bay. He, even in this fight against Colin Anglin, who's not particularly good, and it can be dangerous, but is completely unused to dealing with adversity so far in his young career. Even in this fight, Woodson got himself backed into the cage several times. Just got pushed back. And I think that I see now the reason for that. It is that like Luke Rockhold, Woodson he gets in trouble when he throws his jab a lot. It just takes so long for his long range strikes to come back, and for him to recover his balance. That literally, I think there are ways around that. He's the type of guy who probably doesn't have to step into his jab at all and can instead focus on changing angles off it. But there is a feeling that when he lengthens his strikes, to use his reach, he gets overextended.
Yeah, I mean,
and looks slow as a result. Whereas when he goes defense first and counters in the pocket, he fights like a tall fighter. He looks quick enough to keep up, but that results in a style where he can be pressured into the fence and beaten at range.
Yeah, it's like when people asked Stefan Struve, they were like, "Why don't you just jab Stefan Struve?"
Yeah,
and that was sort of a highlight reel. I mean, you could have a low light reel of Stefan Struve just having his jab cross countered.
Yeah,
because
he was trying.
And if you thought about it from that perspective, you'd be like, "Yeah, if I was Stefan Struve, I probably would stop jabbing a lot because I'm just getting countered." I tried.
What do you people want from me? I tried. God damn it. Yeah, I think there are ways around that. I don't think I'm unwilling to accept the idea that the jab can be a strike which is simply too dangerous for you to throw.
Yeah, I mean, Stefan Struve's problems with it, like he was extremely slow.
Yeah,
to his credit, not that.
No, he's not that slow. Like I said, when he's not overextending himself, when he's certainly quick enough with his eyes to pick up on wild combinations coming his way and pretty successfully defend every shot individually. He's got a really nice boxing defense. And when he shortens his shots up, they're more than quick enough to serve as counters in that range. He's a very sharp counterpuncher. But yeah, keeping people at bay or pursuing them, he starts looking a little messy. That reach starts to look like a liability.
Shot selection on a hurt opponent,
Mm-hmm. And the body shot highlight of the card. I always enjoy saying that.
That's very nice.
Let's take a break.
I just want Sean Woodson to continue to rise, and eventually his career can culminate in a fight on Halloween against Josh Emmett. And any card, the card that's close to Halloween, just book that fight, make it. That's what everyone wants.
Just because it's weird freaks?
Yeah.
Okay.
In different kinds. Like, Josh Emmett is kind of like a muscle-bound Nosferatu-looking type.
Yeah.
Whereas...
I don't know. If we go... You say different kinds, but I think they're sort of different kinds within a clade. Like, if we stick with the Falmer comparison for Josh Emmett, then wasn't just sort of like a different class of Falmer?
Yeah.
He's like a specially
There's still
bred...
definitely reason to put this on for Halloween. Yeah, he looks like one of them's like a muscled Nosferatu guy, and
Emmett's
Nosferatu, and the other's like a bulbous, hairy skeleton.
I just think like you mouse over these two monsters, these two monster NPCs, and Emmett is like Falmer Berserker, and Woodson is like Falmer, I don't know, Mage's Apprentice or something.
Necromonger.
Yes. Falmer Necromonger. Absolutely. Okay. So don't make that fight. I don't want to. Sean Woodson will absolutely get murdered, and I don't want to see that.
No, he needs to work his way out to it. Like I said, this is going to be the culmination of his career.
Okay. I'm cool with that. Let's take a break on that note. When we come back, I guess we're talking about a couple of these fights. Which ones did we select? Michael
Grant Yanez and
Chiesa versus Brady.
Chiesa Brady, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Hello and welcome back to Heavy Hands. Two undercard fights from the upcoming Vieira versus Tate card. Maybe some people will be upset we're skipping the main event, Phil. The truth of the matter is, I don't care about it. That's okay, right?
Yeah. I mean, the women's bantamweight division Miesha Tate left and then came back, and it must have been just like she's just stepping back into the same thing.
Yeah. It hasn't
only
changed.
Slightly worse. It has like slightly less people in it, and a few people have retired.
Yeah. That's about how it feels. And it was cool to see Miesha come back. It was cool to see her really look genuinely like classic Miesha Tate, which was very much an uncertainty given how she looked in her last couple fights before her MMA retirement, which is a particular kind of retirement that isn't retirement. But yeah, at this point, it's like, I guess she needs to make something happen or gain some momentum or something before I will actually care. So instead, we're going to talk about some undercard fights that look if not necessarily the most relevant in the world, then, exciting and compelling style matchups. The first of those, Michael Chiesa, now coming off his loss to, Vicente Luque, is taking on Sean Brady, whom I just spent a long time discovering who I keep getting him confused with, and it's Joe Selecki, a fighter who Phil doesn't know who that is.
You get him confused with Brendan Allen.
Yeah, that's weirder to me.
Yeah.
They look very different.
It's just like white grapplers, I guess.
Wow. We got misogyny on this episode now. Racism. Pure and simple. Reverse racism. Or is it reverse when you're a white guy? I don't know. Yeah, Sean Brady he's a type. He's I think I was a little more I think I thought he was a little more promising than I do now. Like 3 or 4 fights ago. Because he's a great athlete is the main thing. He's very powerful, he's quick, and he sort of gave the impression of like a burgeoning all-rounder, all-terrain fighter early on. And then I've now seen him against like Jake Matthews. And he just looked a little close to Jake Matthews' level, basically. And I think that's because Jake Matthews is a big, strong athlete. You know? So, against Michael Chiesa?
I mean, it seems like it's primed to be a fairly forgiving bounce back for Michael Chiesa.
Maybe.
So I mean, who do we expect to dictate the wrestling exchanges in this one? Because one of the things about Brady is that he is consistently fighting people who do not want to wrestle with him.
Again, not necessarily.
I mean, Matthews took him down off a court kick, did he not?
Uh-huh.
Then he got swept.
Yeah.
Not sure whether I'm going to pick people to necessarily sweep Michael Chiesa in the way that I might have done in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and otherwise it typically is Brady having to do like his evasive footwork, draw you into a shot kind of game. Dictating is a complicated term, though. I said before that if you were to look for a parallel on Chiesa's record, this really feels like his fight with Kevin Lee. Who dictated the wrestling in that fight. I think it was less a problem of someone, if I recall correctly, I think Chiesa might have gotten the first takedowns. And
I think he did. And then
Chiesa just
Kevin Lee got position on him and took his back.
Hulked him on the ground.
I'm not sure that after the RDA fight, I'm totally willing to pick people out grappling Chiesa from their back, like consistently. I think the Luque fight was still like within the bounds of what Chiesa does. We mentioned it before the fight that he still has a tendency, I think, to dive into danger. But no, I'd be pretty surprised if Brady tapped him. I've got to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, could happen. Brady's got a good guillotine as well. He's clearly a very sharp grappler. Like it in a athlete versus athlete pairing with Matthews. It was Brady's superior technique that, it was a very clear win, despite how uncomfortable he may have looked in certain moments. And it was really just the striking that looked a little, dare I say, exposed to me, where it was like an opportunity to see him against someone he wasn't just clearly faster than and couldn't see literally everything they were doing coming a mile away. And so he just looked like a much shallower striker. He wasn't able to put together any combinations. He had very few effective counters that weren't takedowns. Didn't land a lot of strikes really at all. But he did completely out-grapple Jake Matthews on the ground.
That is quite impressive. But I still think that I wouldn't be. I guess I wouldn't be surprised to see him outstrike Chiesa.
Brady,
because he is, yeah. Because I think he does look like a well-schooled striker.
Yes,
he's when he throws in combination, he can be nice and relaxed. He puts his punches together quite well. I think he just sort of gets the impression of someone who has to sort of charge up if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
He has to really think about something before he can do it. He needs like a few seconds where he's like, okay, I'm going to wait, and then we're going to do this. I don't think he would do necessarily particularly well in like a pure ace setting, but he is definitely like a much better natural striker than Michael Chiesa was. Chiesa might functionally outstrike him because he's just aggressive and has been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
But Brady, I think, is a more natural striker than him. I think the main thing that really concerns me from the Brady perspective is I don't think he understands his positioning in the cage as well as Chiesa does now. That's another big change in Chiesa, is that he really understands when and how he should be pushing people back.
Yeah.
When he should be drawing them on. Brady is really just sort of gives space under the understanding that he is the quick guy.
Yeah. Well, like I said, so much of his work on the feet even is, I think, focused on trying to run people into that reactive shot. I think it means he's more than happy to give ground. It typically is the thing that allows him to start dominating the fight. Provided the opponent is reckless enough. And you got to think, I mean, the thing is, there's still a chance that Chiesa will be. I think there's a difference between seeing Neil Magny's against the fence, I'm going to blast in and end up in a clinch. And doing it against Sean Brady, who's like a squat little powerhouse, who again is very physically strong, despite being smaller in a way that somebody like Neil Magny is not.
Yeah. I mean, I thought Brady's striking looked actually very good against Court McGee, but as you mentioned.
Yes. I think that's just an athletic gulf where he was allowed to shine. And then you see
it shows that his optimal, the striking game he is working towards is is actually a relatively fluid one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it sort of disintegrated a bit against Matthews, and also kind of against Naudiev as well.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's big, he's quite athletic. I don't like this. So yeah, I think you have to pick Chiesa, really. I think Brady would have to make either his striking work very consistently against someone who is, I wouldn't necessarily describe Chiesa as athletic, but he's huge and powerful, and to have to dictate the wrestling off his back foot. I think it's actually much more interesting than I thought about it than I thought it was on first notice. I think Brady genuinely does have some real potential. You just have to pick Chiesa until he can win that kind of fight.
You know what I say to that, Phil? I say make me, bitch. Because I'm going.
You're going to pick Brady?
I think I'm going to pick Brady. I don't think he has to dictate wrestling off the back foot. I mean, unless you're envisioning a fight where Chiesa doesn't grapple with him, I think Chiesa has never been the type of grappler that you can't reverse. You can't attack him with a submission. The thing that's often gotten him in trouble, or if not often, then, the few times he has gotten in trouble on the ground, is he reacts under pressure with a sort of single-mindedness. Where he will just dive on another submission, or I don't think Chiesa likes to lose moments. He wants to get back in control and back on the offensive. He's like a true pressure fighter on the ground in that way. And basically that's the commonality. When Luque submits him, what happened there? He got taken down and then, or knocked down and then went in for a shot and got his neck wrapped up. Against Kevin Lee, numerous scrambles that don't really go his way before the one that actually results in him having his back taken and losing the fight. But there is this thing where when presented with an opportunity where Michael Chiesa could sort of ride out a bad position and try again later, or forge ahead, try to keep his pace on the ground going and get back to his feet, he's going to take option B. And Brady is a sensational back taker, an excellent sweeper, And I don't know. I don't think he has to be winning the wrestling outright to make Chiesa make bad decisions and then win the scrambles that result from those decisions. So I'm just going to pick him.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's a good. It's a good, interesting. Like, it's definitely, as I said, it's much more interesting than I thought it was.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think Brady does have a lot of potential.
For sure. He's a great athlete. He's a phenomenal technician on the ground, and he's good enough on the feet to, against lesser opposition, trick you into thinking that he's actually a really good striker. So he's definitely got a high ceiling, I think. Next one should be, I think, a little easier to break down. Davy Grant, Adrian Yanez. What do you make of that?
This is another one where it's like Yanez's slow starts could really come back to haunt him a bit here.
Yeah.
He needs to, in some ways, he needs to stop the amount of damage he's absorbing relatively early in his career.
Sure.
But yeah, it's one of these ones where I think it really seems like the story of the fight is that Yanez is going to be getting probably fairly badly beaten up early, and then we'll turn the tide like in round 2.
Yeah. And I'm not even entirely sure he'll get too badly beaten up just because I don't think it was just like the like if we're looking at his last fight. Oh my god, another guy whose name I'm forgetting.
Randy Costa?
Randy Costa. Costa like actually made in a sort of desperate suicidal way some really, really good technical decisions in that fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was just, he was doing the classic thing of being someone who is very tense and wired in.
Yes. And
thinking very, very hard about every single situation and
yes.
mentally exhausted himself.
Yeah, but the thoughts he was having in those moments were good. The shots he was lighting Yanez up with were by and large jabs, and then like separating kicks, as Yanez was trying to exit exchanges. He countered him quite a lot, but it really all came off the jab, which was really, really insistent. Does Davy Grant have a jab?
No.
He definitely will surprise people. And in a slow start, I 100% think, yes, Yanez will have at least one moment of pronounced difficulty. But the thing with Grant is that, like, he tends to surprise people, I think, once they start nailing him already. And then he just goes complete fucking maniac mode and puts together these long, awkwardly angled combinations. He doesn't really have a jab, though. I don't think he has a weapon to actually, like, establish his control of the fight before it becomes kind of, before Yanez picks enough to at least make the exchanges equal. And I think once you let Yanez get to that point, you're in trouble already. Cause then you might start hurting him, but he's proven he's plenty durable. He can make adjustments. Mm-hmm. He's used to being a slow starter who comes on late. I think you want to put him off that track early. And, I just don't trust Grant's like process as a striker. I think too often in recent fights, I have had to see him get fucked up before he surprises the opponent with his weird long arms and his weird power. So it'll be exciting. It's going to be a good fight.
You're calling me racist.
What? Because he's English?
You've just been describing Chito Vera.
What do you mean?
Oh, he doesn't have a weapon to, close space, and he needs to get fucked up before he gets his weird power. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but
love Chito Vera.
He's not as good as Chito. We saw that.
It's very
concretely.
Very close. It was an extremely close. It was a pretty close fight.
Well, that's because Chito is a dysfunctional mess. But
yes, they're both dysfunctional messes.
Yeah, but would you pick Chito to beat Yanez? I think it'd be a similar problem. It's different, in fact, because Chito is like a much more diligent kicker and is more creative than Grant. I think Grant, there is always an edge of desperation to what he's doing. Yeah. Where you're like, oh, you are going to fall apart from what you're doing right now. Whereas Chito.
Also, Chito is just bigger than Grant.
Chito's bigger than Grant. But Chito's like, the more he does, the better he does. Grant, there's a point of diminishing return.
Yes, that is true.
He's just wild. And I don't think, I'm not sure I would pick Chito Vera to beat Yanez right now. I think it'd be a very interesting fight. A less structured, less wilder version of Chito who is also kind of a slow starter, but then also self-destructs later in the fight. I wouldn't pick that guy over Yanez. It's going to be violent and crazy at some points. I mean, there's a reason I wanted to talk about it, but yep, should be fun to have Yanez back. And what was racist about that, by the way? That's the part that confused me.
Because he's white, and that's clearly the people that we've.
Oh, so my double standard in liking Chito, but liking Grant for no reason other than the color of his skin.
You're allowed to call me racist against white people.
Well,
I feel like I should be too.
Yeah, you caught me. I'm not going to deny it. That's it for this week's episode of Heavy Hands. Phil, I know you got something to plug. Have you read anything recently from any of these other clowns doing analysis?
You know what? I don't think I have, actually.
Yeah, it sucks. They all suck. I don't read any of it. I always just pretend. Kyle comes on the show. He's like, I know Connor didn't read it. Like, damn right. I don't read shit.
Oh, yeah.
I would really like to put out some articles this month, but I have nothing in the works as of right now. But I enjoy being productive with articles, so hopefully I will have something to plug for you guys next week. Until then, thank you so very much for listening. Find us on Twitter if you would like to yell at us for not writing articles. Phil is at Evil Greg Jackson. I am at Boxing Bush, B-U-S-C-H. You can find me by the handle or by the incredibly stupid profile picture that my girlfriend hates. And that's it. We'll talk to you guys next week when we will have Font versus Aldo on deck. That's going to be an exciting one. Next week for that, and if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands. Oh, Brendan Allen's on that card too, Phil.
Another one.
The other one.